so I can get kind of a feel of where we're all at. Can somebody, does anybody know who Satoshi Nakamoto is? Okay.
Is that him?
Yeah, that's basically the gist of
And
it.
no one knows who he is?
Yeah, that's basically where we're going.
Okay.
And in general, I kind of wanted to, it's a generational thing. I think young people are very much in tune with the story of Satoshi Nakamoto. I find it, he is the creator of the Bitcoin concept and things like that. Say in 2008 timeframe or so, he published a paper called Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. This is the paper right here. And what's the marvel about this paper is it's 8 pages. And I'm sure you've all seen the news reports like Bitcoin's going crazy. It's really changing the world. I'm not going to pro-offer whether it's good or bad. It's just that here's a guy, or a person or something, published and as a technologist, I always really respect this. He boiled down this very difficult thing into 9 pages. Now, those are kind of dense pages, but if you sit down and read them, you can kind of come through this. Now, you can kind of come out through this, because the paper was published in 2008. We had the financial crisis of 2000 to 2008 with the housing crisis, massive bailouts by the government, a collapse of the subprime mortgage lending market. A lot of that was the government ultimately guaranteed a lot of mortgage loans, which led to risky banking practices from the investment community. And at the end of the day, when all that stuff unwound, it required an immense amount of bailout by the government. It caused a lot of problems in the world economy. And at that point in time, there's a lot of doubt about, the government is in a sense, our government is our money, and if the government kind of falls apart, you don't, what is it? Our dollar is only worth what the government kind of says it is. So Bitcoin is, in my mind, is kind of like it's a thought where we're just going to go off, we're going to take a group of people, we're going to self-govern ourselves, and we have some technology behind it, and we're going to man it, we're not going to have the policy or the regulation or anything like that. It's kind of they use some words, self-trusting type network. Essentially, like two people can transact without trusting because there's computational parts of this technology. In this, and I'm going to refer to this just briefly, the technology kind of makes it all work is something called blockchain. And in essence, what everybody, you have miners, which are people who have computers and they have miner farms and they're very big. And the thing that makes it all work is let's say we got 5 tables here, each table has a copy of the blockchain, which you can think of as a ledger, and they all generally have to be in agreement for a block to be accepted. So that's how you get trust. Now, when Satoshi first started this, he wrote the software to get this going. Now, because each block depends upon a previous block, there had to be that very first block. And they call this very first block the Genesis block. And in this Genesis block, it's kind of an exception to the rule, because the rule is every block depends upon the preceding block except for the Genesis block. Now, in the Genesis block, there's some text in there that was left behind, and it says, the times 3, January 2009, Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks. That refers to a headline in the New York Times, and it's generally just referring to kind of like our banking financial systems are in crisis, and this is an alternative of what we're going to do. Now, shortly thereafter, so just to continue, the miners who do the work of validating the blockchain, they get rewarded, and that's how they make their money. But they're putting in their computer resources, they're providing electricity. They get rewarded. So at first it was just Satoshi was mining coins. So he mined 1 million Bitcoins for himself. And so those 1 million Bitcoins are still sitting there. And Satoshi himself effectively disappeared in this time. And in a way, like, nobody ever met him. The only way anybody ever saw him was through emails. So he basically decided he didn't want to be involved anymore. And they keep the source code of the software in a central repository. He turned over the keys to the software to someone else, and he disappeared. And then this other guy really didn't want the job, so then the responsibility for that core Bitcoin team got kind of spread out over a bunch of people who really weren't necessarily the most responsible people. So today there's a lot of governance kinds of problems in the Bitcoin network, and they're kind of because the Satoshi kind of disappeared. The guy who he handed the keys to didn't want it. He kind of just handed it off. And so some of the circumstances of the Bitcoin market are a little bit off these days. Just in closing, like Bitcoin and these other cryptocurrencies have grown up beyond their original purpose. The social impact is immense. People are trading. I don't know how many people have even traded Bitcoin. From the first of the year, they've probably doubled 15 times. It's like 15,000%, however that works out to. But to this day, like, nobody knows who Satoshi is. They guess who Satoshi is. They don't know whether it's a person or maybe it's a nation state. He's just kind of gone, and if you start to consider about the impact on the world, who is he? And we can kind of tell, like, his Bitcoins are still there. So, and those Bitcoins are worth like $16 billion. Wow.